Good afternoon, everybody. Today, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you someone who is a true American hero, a Green Beret veteran with 32 years of active duty service, just retired General Don Bolduc, who I've had the pleasure to work with in Africa over the last couple of years, where he was the commander of Special Operations Command Africa. Above and beyond that, he has served 10 deployments around the world, including helping lead the charge in Afghanistan in 2001. He is the recipient of some 5 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and is known by his comrades, his peers, and his subordinates as either Captain America or everyone's general. It is a delight and an honor to have you with us today, General, and thank you so much for not only your years of service to our nation, but also for coming aboard as an advisor to Spirit of America. Your insights, experience, and advice are invaluable to us.
Well, thank you, Isaac, and thank you for that very warm and generous introduction. I appreciate it. It's an honor to talk to you today. It's an honor to be part of the Spirit of America, and I'm thankful that Jim Hake and yourself asked me to be part of the team. Thank you.
Absolutely. So today I'd like to discuss with you something that happened over the last week, which is tragic. And is something that weighs heavily on all of our hearts, yours more than most, I would say. As folks may be aware, last week we lost 4 US Army Green Berets in Niger. They were attacked by Islamic extremist militants and lost their lives last Wednesday. Our thoughts and deepest sympathies go out to their families, to their friends, and to their comrades. And one of the things we wanted to talk about with you today was basically why the United States is engaged in Africa. I know for a lot of people, Africa seems like a very faraway place with a lot of issues that seem almost untouchable and intangible. And how do you wrap your head around the issues that plague the continent? So I was wondering if you could take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about Niger and a little bit about what you and your men and women in uniform did there.
Sure, Isaac, thank you. And let me echo your sentiments on the loss of our 4 service members there and the effect that has on the team, the effect that has on SoC Africa, US AFRICOM, and the families of many, many others. But I want to remind everybody that those aren't the first casualties, and I don't think they'll be the last casualties in Africa. It's important, I think, for everybody to understand why we are in Africa and why Africa is so important. And I can sum that up by just saying that, starting outside in, that Europe, the Levant, the Middle East, Asia, South America, Central America, and the United States is affected by instability in Africa, particularly instability brought on by violent extremist organizations that are able to organize, able to join forces and support each other, and able to influence populists and control territory. And if this is the case, then Africa will remain unstable, and an unstable Africa is not good for governance, security, development, not only in Africa, but certainly will affect security elsewhere in the world, as I have described how Africa really affects the other continents in a big way because of trafficking, illicit trafficking, criminal trafficking, violent extremist organizations using the same things to bring arms and foreign fighters back and forth. And as we have seen in Syria and Iraq, the largest number of foreign fighters come out of North Africa to support that. They are starting to trickle back. That is going to have an effect in Africa because they're coming back to established violent extremist organization networks. And they're in local areas that will continue to destabilize the national government, prevent the delivery of socioeconomic development, education, and so on. And those will end up being the root causes for the instability in Africa and will bleed over into many other places in the world.
Absolutely. So, as you know, we've been working with the folks from Special Operations Command Africa in Niger for quite some time now, and I was wondering if you could shed a little bit of light on why Niger in particular is such an important place and sort of a focal point of U.S. efforts on the continent, especially in West Africa.
Sure. So it's the connectedness of the African partners regionally. It's the connectedness of the threat. It is the alignment of the violent extremist organizations in their connectedness. Since 2013, Department of State has listed, I want to say about 14 new violent extremist organizations, and 10 of those operate in Africa today. And what's going on in Africa, and I'll get to Niger here in a second after this, is all linked through violent extremist organization social media, as well as the major publication called The Beak, and that's something that they tell everybody what they're going to do, and it's amazing as to how they communicate that and how close it is to what they're actually going to do in terms of activities. So the question that everyone asks is, when will VEOs operate in Africa? Well, they're operating now. When will they take root? Well, they've taken root now. When are they going to affect stability? They've affected stability now. So how long are we going to tolerate this as an international community? And are we going to handle the problem when it's small, or are we going to wait until it gets too large and then becomes a significant problem for everybody? When you're looking at Niger specifically, Niger takes it from all sides: north, south, east, and west. Niger is a linchpin country over in West Africa for those reasons. The trafficking, the historical trafficking, the violent extremist organizations coming out of Libya and Algeria, coming out of Mali, coming up out of Burkina Faso, and coming over from Chad, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, and all its affiliates, makes Niger a very unstable place and the crossroads for violent extremist organization activities north, south, east, and west. And that's hugely important. And that's why Niger stands as a very key location, and why the U.S. government has been focused on Niger for some years now and has applied U.S. AFRICOM components, force structure, and support to Niger along every line of land, air, and yes, water, because of the Lake Chad Basin.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to look at the confluence of these violent extremist organizations. So as you said, Boko Haram coming from the south, you see Al-Qaeda, El Morabitoun, Mujwa, those entities coming from the west. You look at the issues of ISIS coming from the north, out of Libya, and then you overlay that on Niger's traditional historical trafficking routes, and you have this very combustible mix both of extremist organizations and a framework for movement. And that's something that not only threatens the rest of West Africa and the stability there, but also threatens Europe up to the north, and then also facilitates movement of folks across the Atlantic into the Western Hemisphere. So obviously a very critical place in which to work. And while Niger seems as this sort of far off land, it actually is very, very important to our efforts as a country. And as we look to combat extremism and increase security and stability in some of these tough places before those problems end up on our doorstep. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the types of folks that the U.S. deploys to these environments, sort of their characteristics, what they do, who they work with, to give people a better sense of what the day in and day out work and roles of these folks are.
Sure. So, US AFRICOM is responsible for this area of operation, and US AFRICOM has Marine, Army, Air Force, Navy, and Special Operation components. And it's a combination of these military forces to include our great civilians that serve in each of those services are contributing as well, and our civilian organizations, both international and non-governmental organizations that we partner with, that make a huge difference there as well. And then our coalition partners, our other international partners. The predominant force structure in Africa and in Niger are SOF forces. SOF forces do a variety of missions, train, equip. They provide advice and assistance, and they assist in teaching our partners how to best employ things. But I think one of the things that they do the best is they bring everybody together. And we do this through a regional model. So when you talk to me about Niger, I'm thinking about, 11 other countries involved in this effort that has to be connected in some way or another. And through the G5 Sahel, which is a senior political organization with very senior chiefs of defense from each of those countries in there, deciding on what to do in this particular area. And so what they have decided is that they're going to follow a regional approach, and that regional approach needs to be connected north, south, east, and west. And so that is a huge step forward, because the regional approach, partnership and cooperation, the assistance with socioeconomic development, civil administration at the local level. One of the problems that Africa has is it's always been run by a very strong central government. It's the exact opposite problem that Afghanistan has, right? Very structured central government that ran everything, right? Well, that left the local government, the local civil administration, very vulnerable, and this is how we're seeing the violent extremist organizations take advantage of that and find safe havens, and our partners just can't project into those areas. So US AFRICOM is not only providing them with the security means to be able to do that, but it's also working the development piece and the governance piece as well, in order to ensure that we get at the root causes of the instability, and that we're just not going down one lane and everything else is going to fall apart around it. The other key thing is that we have to be very careful of absorption rate and exceeding the ability of the African country to be able to maintain and sustain the help we give them, the equipment that we give them, because that has been a huge problem. And we develop something that they can't sustain, and that falls apart. As well. But your SOF forces are the predominant number of forces on the continent conducting the operations, and in some cases they assist the other components depending on what program or training is going on, and the other components support the SOF forces as well. So what you got is, in very, very remote areas, small teams, about 12 guys, partnered with battalion-sized elements of our Nigerian counterparts, operating in the most remote areas, the toughest terrain that you've ever seen. And I can tell you that the way I like to characterize it is, it's not the end or the edge of the earth, but you can see it from there. And so it's extremely difficult on sustaining yourself, on movement, on resupply, on medical issues, particularly if somebody gets injured. We have the greatest medical capability in our special operation force teams than any other units in the United States military. And so point of injury generally isn't the problem. They're able to deal with that, sustain it. It is, I think, the ability for us to get them out and into a higher level of care. And my 4 years in AFRICOM, I made it my mission to do that. And, when I left command in June of this past of 17, I tell you, I think we were as close to as good as we were going to get it, and still keep our promise to our guys that they would not suffer any undue suffering. And that takes a lot of collaboration with our African partners, with NGOs, with other international organizations, and our coalition partners. It's not just U.S. efforts, and we have to make sure that we work together and we cooperate, and we have partnerships that you don't see in many other places in the world. Our teams have partnerships with Doctor Without Borders. It doesn't mean that we're inside their formations. It just means that we're talking. And by talking, we can explain what we're doing. We know where each other's at, and we're not going to make any mistakes, and we're not going to have any redundancies, and we're not going to be perceived as just out there militarizing the continent, because what the soft teams bring is not just the security piece. They bring civil affairs, and they connect the military to the civilian populace. They bring military information capabilities so that the military can talk to the populace and explain to them what they're going to do. They teach them human rights. They teach them how to operate in and among the populace, which is extremely important, so that they don't have any unnecessary civilian casualties or collateral damage, which will undermine the government and turn the people against them. They do, yes, shoot, move, communicate, survive, and sustain type training, but that ends up at the end of the day becoming the smallest piece of what they're doing. It's the larger capability and capacity building that's really, really important to allowing our partners to be able to own the problem, own the fight, and own the solution. And we work ourselves out of a job. And I know I was very proud of the number of transitions that we did across Africa in a number of areas as we went in years ago to help our partners, and we've developed a capability in them and a capacity in them, and now we have transitioned that over to them, and they're doing it, and we're partnering with them in a traditional way, and it's a true partnership relationship, and not one where they're dependent on us or pushing away from the table and saying you got it.
Yeah, I think that having had the chance to work in Africa over the last few years, the regional integrated approaches that you all have developed and employed really across the continent is something that is a very effective way to get after these really tricky problem sets. I've been singularly impressed really across the board with both the U.S. folks that are working in these very challenging environments. As you said, they're out at the edge of the world, and they can see over the edge of the world. But then you look at their commitment, their dedication to this mission, and the way that they work so closely with the local partners. The G5 Sahel being the headquarters that encompasses Cameroon, Chad, Nigeria, Niger, and Burkina Faso. I think that's right. As just being a true connection point that is absolutely critical to where we go next with this, with the ultimate eye, as you said at the end of your comments about, eventually having them graduate to taking care of some of their own issues. That really does represent, I think, the best way forward. And so it's been a true pleasure to work not only with your troops from the soft community, but also with the local partners who share their dedication and commitment by orders of magnitude, as well as the civilian partners from the State Department, from U.S. Agency for International Development, international NGOs, local NGOs, everyone who is committed to not just sort of staying in their lanes to combat these issues, but really trying to figure out the most collaborative approach that nets the best results going forward.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And you made some excellent points there. And one of the things that we put together early on was, hey, we got to be able to come up with an operational strategy that is easily understood and easily explained. And in 2014, in 2015, when I took command, April of 2015, we had some great stuff going on the continent, but it wasn't connected in any way. And so picking up the baton from Jim Linder, who did some great work out there and, put things in place, the next logical step that we saw was to connect that in a meaningful way in an operational strategy, because he did what he was asked to do, and he got soft forces out there and operating and doing a great job. And then, the transition from me to him, okay, now I'm going to take it and I'm going to work with my guys to come up with an operational strategy that connects all of that, right? Next logical progression, right? Take it to the next level. But we had to do some convincing with our African partners. And the bilateral issues and the trilateral issues and working across. And it was mostly the military guys saw how they needed to work together. They just had to convince their bosses. And so that took some time. And once we were able to have a few conferences and do that, and really start come together in February of 16 at Flintlock, it really convinced a lot of people that this regional platform, this multinational joint task force, Liptako-Gorma task force is being established, the task force that we had in Central Africa to deal with the Coney issue, they were highly successful African-led task forces that took some time to train, took some time to set up, took some time to resource, but that's okay. When we look at our partners, we kind of judge them harshly, I think, and don't remember, our sausage making when it comes to that kind of stuff too. And we struggle with it. Yeah, we struggle with it to this day. So, so we came up with this outside in, inside out operational strategy. And we took it from the way that Caesar fought in Spain during his conquests there. And basically what he did was, he surrounded the capital city and he had a 10-mile wall built around it to keep people in and deal with those issues. And then he realized that, they're getting help from the outside. So he built another wall around that and focused outside. So, inside out, outside in, and that's, it took him a number of years, but he finally won. And it's, one of those things that made him great. And there's Latin words for that, but I'm not going to go down that road. But bottom line is we did the same thing, and so you got the problem in Lake Chad Basin originates from Nigeria. So everything that we do there to support our partner is a combination of inside out things that are connected to the countries that are doing the containment piece, which is Niger, Chad, Cameroon, outside in. And so it gives basically the threat nowhere to go. And then next door in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, you have Liptako-Gorma, and that tri-border area is the inside out, and then you have the outside in. And so you got Mauritania, and you got Mali, and you got Burkina Faso, and you have Niger. You have Algeria doing coordination with them along their border. Mauritania plays a key role in this as well. They're great partners. And of course, Morocco watches this closely. Libya, Chad, it's just amazing how it all comes together. And so you take this operational outside in, inside out. It's very easy to explain, very easy to visualize, and you connect it to the regional countries and then region by region. And then the next thing you know, you're covering gaps and you're doing things that you need to do. And that's what the task forces were designed to do, was cover those gaps in between the different regions and the different task forces. And our guys are in there advising and assisting and working that very closely. Very, very simple concept that has paid huge dividends. And at this point in time, our African partners have bought into this. And when you talk to them, you get the sense that it was their idea. And I think that's great. What better way to keep moving forward? You can have it. It's your idea. I want you to make it better because only you have the insight to make it better because, you are, countries and subject matter experts in your countries and in Africa and in your region. So we need you to run with this. And they're doing that. And we're seeing it. And Niger and all the areas that we're in plays an important role when you go east to Boko Haram and ISIS, West Africa, and then you go west into Mali, where Al Qaeda and all those affiliates have joined forces there, and you go north into into ISIS, Al Qaeda land up there as well, and then play in the very, very tricky game of criminal and illicit trafficking and violent extremist organization trafficking, and then you have refugees and people that are wanting to get out. And so we're hoping to create conditions where people aren't running away from their countries, they're staying in their countries.
Absolutely. And so, I think that this conversation has been really instructive for our audience who, really wants to learn more about what the challenges are there, what the threats are there, and what we're doing about them as a country and why it matters to us as a country. And I think that the regional approach that you just articulated is the way to get after these really tricky problems. Before we close on this, I'd like to talk for just one more moment about sort of how we started the conversation, and that was talking about the 4 young men that lost their lives in Niger last Wednesday. And at the beginning of your last set of comments, one of the things that you brought up was trust. And it strikes me that that is something that these young men and women in the SOF community have to develop with their partners almost instantaneously. As we reflect upon the lives of these 4 young men, I was wondering if you could tell us, having served, as a private up to a 1-star general, what are the core characteristics that makes a special operations soldier unique, makes a special operations soldier successful, and what are the things that you look for from these young men and women as they go and work in these incredibly challenging environments?
Well, first and foremost, the thing that I look for when I'm talking to a guy is not how smart he is, but how much common sense he has. And you can really get a sense of whether someone has common sense or not just by, a couple of conversations with them. You may figure it out in the first conversation. But having a huge amount of common sense backed up by creative intelligence. All these guys take a test. They all go to college. Our NCO is the same way. They pass basic tests. Everybody knows they're smart. They have the level of intellect that they need in order to be successful. But that doesn't make you successful as a special operation force soldier. It's your common sense and your creative intelligence, your ability to operate in an environment in which you require little to no guidance, and taking the commander's intent and using that inside a construct that empowers you to use initiative. So you have to have initiative. And so you can't be a hand wringer. You got to be a guy that's willing to roll up their sleeves, and you can't do both at the same time. And it's really easy to find people that identify them that don't have common sense, that don't have creative intelligence, and that are afraid to use their initiative because they don't want to make a mistake, right? And so you have to put them inside an environment where mistakes are acceptable. Illegal, immoral, negligently unsafe, and bad attitudes are not acceptable, and you'll be held accountable in a different way for those. But mistakes are underwritten because that's the only way you're going to make a mistake. And oh, by the way, failure is an option, right? We too often put our guys in a predicament in which they've described their mission to you. You've sent them out on that mission, and by God, come hell or high water, they're going to be successful in that mission. Instead of coming back to you and saying, hey, I think our initial assumptions were not good. I think we need to do this over here or do this way or that way. And that kind of way of operating is unique to Special Operation Forces, I think, because they're less likely to keep going down a road without raising their hand and saying, hey, this isn't really getting us where we need to do. We need to do X, Y, and Z. And that's hugely important, I think. And you got to educate your higher headquarters. And so you take common sense, creative intelligence, initiative, you put that inside someone who's energetic and loves what they're doing and has a passion for what they're doing. And you can really see that in the way they approach life and the way they approach their job. Someone who is loyal to the organization is hugely important. Loyalty to person, that's a chain of command. You got a rank structure, you get in order, you do what you're told. But that's kind of the way, that's probably where it should stay. It's loyalty to that organization to make sure that the organization is doing the right thing and following through with its mandate, because, it's the people inside the organization that make the organization successful. And it's generally not the leadership. The leadership is there to assist folks to be successful, not take the credit for or think they know it all. And I think that those, in my mind, are not kind of the the characteristics that you normally hear. I think they're inherently American, and I think they're inherently soft. And then there's this intangible thing that our guys have for each other, and it's the respect and love that they have for each other and for what they do and for the partners that they work with. These guys get in there and they live with them, they sleep with them. I've been out to every single location. There isn't the us and them out there. We share the same hardships, do the same things, operate in the same environment, and we do it in a way that builds respect and partnership and trust among each other. And so we got this kind of guy doing these kind of things, and you can't help but love him. And that's what I see when I go out on the ground, particularly when I go out on the ground when there's a transition between two teams, and the love for the guy leaving and the hope by our partners the guy coming in is going to be the same way is hugely important. And I think these characteristics that I described are very shareable characteristics, and they're not characteristics that can't be shared and seen from one person or from one team to another. And that kind of consistency in how we select our guys to operate and our gals to operate is hugely important, because without consistency, people are never going to know what to expect, and there's just going to be too much instability or turmoil or other kinds of unpredictable things that get in the way of mission accomplishment.
Absolutely. So just before we sign off here, I wondered if you had any words you'd like to pass on to those folks on the continent.
Well, yes. First of all, I've had a couple jobs in my life that I thought were the best jobs I've ever had. And one of them was detachment commander, company commander, battalion commander, Siege SoA Afghanistan commander, SIFSOC-A commander, deputy commander of the Special Operations Joint Task Force in Afghanistan. And then, of course, my culminating command for my career was SOC Africa. And the SOF guys that are working on the continent have my undying trust and respect for the things that they do and the willingness that they have to go out in very remote areas, very dangerous areas, and partner with our partners on behalf of our country. And one of the most important things that I think people need to keep in mind on why Africa matters is if we have one American doing one thing anywhere in the world, then on behalf of U.S. goals, objectives, and strategy, then that means that place matters, and it should matter to everybody. And so I want them to know that they're doing God's work, that they're supporting their country, and that it doesn't come without sacrifice, both for you and your families. And I hope that you stay safe and continue to move forward.
General Bolduc, I just want to say thank you so much for educating our broader Spirit of America team on why Africa matters, why it's important, why we have people there, and sharing a little bit about, what it means to be a special operations soldier. I think that was a hugely valuable and informative discussion, and just want to thank you so much, just not only just for that, but also for your years of service and dedication to this country. It's an honor to have you be part of the team, and thanks for everything.
Well, thank you, and I'm excited to join the team of professionals in the Spirit of America because of the commitment to our nation that you guys have, our military, our service members, and civilians doing the missions throughout the world. It's really an incredible thing. I've seen you in Afghanistan. I've seen you in Africa now. And to be part of Spirit of America provides me a unique opportunity to continue to serve our service members, civilians, and their families. So I really want to thank you for that. It's a unique way for me to stay involved and to give something back and to continue to serve others.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care.